Imagine being a king caught between a massive, unstoppable empire and your own unshakable faith. You see, this story, it isn't just found in ancient scriptures. It's literally etched in stone and carved into clay, stuff that was buried for thousands of years. Today, we're going to piece together the incredible, almost unbelievable story of King Hezekiah.
Okay, let's just start with a boast, a really big one. These are the words of Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, and trust me, this guy was one of the most powerful rulers on the entire planet at the time. With this single, chilling phrase, he just perfectly sums up the life-or-death situation his rival, King Hezekiah, was in. So how on earth did Hezekiah end up as the bird in the cage?
All right, so how did he end up in that cage? Well, to get there, we got to understand the man himself. Hezekiah takes the throne of Judah around 715 BC. And you have to picture this. Judah is this small, kind of vulnerable kingdom living completely in the massive shadow of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. They were the superpower of the day. So Hezekiah takes power, and he's only 25 years old. Now, his father, King Ahaz, he had played it super safe. He basically just bowed down to Assyria, paid them tribute, even started adopting their religious practices. But Hezekiah? Oh, he was about to go down a very different and a very dangerous path.
I mean, the scale of his reforms, it was just staggering. This wasn't some minor tweak to policy. This was a full-on religious revolution. He reopens and purifies the temple in Jerusalem. He tears down all these pagan worship sites and sacred pillars. He even smashes the famous bronze serpent that Moses himself had made, because people had kind of started worshiping it as an idol. He was drawing a massive line in the sand. From now on, Judah worships only one God, period.
And then comes the massive political gamble. The super powerful Assyrian king Sargon II dies, and Hezekiah sees an opening. He just stops paying the crippling annual tribute. You can think of it like protection money, basically, that you pay a giant empire to leave you alone. And not only that, he joins a rebellion with a bunch of other small kingdoms. Now, this was a direct slap in the face to the new Assyrian king, Sennacherib. In the empire's eyes, this was high treason. So as you can probably guess, the empire did not take this well. Not at all. In 701 BC, Sennacherib marches his enormous army straight into Judah, and his goal is simple: to make a brutal example of this rebellious little king.
46. Just let that number sink in. 46. That's how many of Hezekiah's walled, fortified cities Sennacherib claims he completely wiped off the map. This wasn't just a raid to teach someone a lesson. No, this was the systematic dismantling of an entire kingdom, piece by piece.
And the fall of Lachish, that was especially brutal. Think of it as Judah's second most important city, a huge military stronghold. And what's amazing is we know exactly what happened, not just from what people wrote down. We have the receipts. The Assyrians literally carved a play-by-play of the siege on their palace walls back in Nineveh. And even better, archaeologists digging at Lachish have found this thick layer of ash and destruction, a physical scar in the earth that perfectly confirms the story. The threat was absolutely, terrifyingly real. And all of that, it brings us to the final prize, the big one. With the rest of Judah literally in flames, Sennacherib's massive army closes in and surrounds the capital, Jerusalem itself. At this point, Hezekiah's entire kingdom is just one single city. But the Assyrians didn't just use brute force. They were masters of psychological warfare. Their top commander walks right up to the city walls and starts shouting, in the Judeans' own language so everyone could understand, and just mocking them. He yells something like, "Name one god from any nation that has ever saved his people from the king of Assyria." He was trying to drive a wedge right between the people and their trust in both Hezekiah and their God. But here's the thing. Hezekiah hadn't just been sitting around waiting for this. He saw it coming. He'd launched this massive preparation project. He built up and expanded the city walls, he stockpiled weapons, he organized this really sophisticated supply system, and we've actually found the royal seals they used for it, so we know it's true. But his most brilliant move, his real ace in the hole, was hidden deep underground. And this is it, the Siloam Tunnel. And folks, this is an absolute marvel of ancient engineering. Seriously, you had two teams of workers starting at opposite ends, and they just chiseled their way through more than 1,700 feet of solid rock until they met perfectly in the middle. And the whole point? To bring the city's main water source, the Gihon Spring, from outside the walls to a protected pool inside the city.
With this one project, Hezekiah made sure his city wasn't going to die of thirst during a long siege.
So, okay, the stage is set. You've got this defiant city, a seemingly unbreakable siege, and a king trapped inside. What happens next? Well, it's one of history's great puzzles because we have two very different stories about how it all ended.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. On one hand, you have the biblical account. It says an angel came down and wiped out 185,000 Assyrian soldiers in a single night. Just poof, gone. On the other hand, the Assyrian version says Hezekiah caved and paid a huge tribute of gold and silver. But, and this is the most important part, both stories agree on the final outcome. Sennacherib, the guy who boasted about everything, never claims to have captured Jerusalem. And for an Assyrian king, that silence is absolutely deafening. These guys were masters of propaganda. They never admitted failure. So the fact that he doesn't brag about taking the city tells you something went very, very wrong for him.
So, for all his boasting, for all his destructive victories across Judah, Sennacherib failed. He never took the ultimate prize. The siege was lifted, the city survived. The bird was never taken from the cage. But Hezekiah's story doesn't end there, not by a long shot. After he survives this incredible external threat, his next big crisis was going to come from within. And it involves some intense personal drama and a decision that would, believe it or not, echo for generations to come.
So, a little while after the whole Assyrian invasion thing, Hezekiah gets incredibly sick, like mortally ill. The prophet Isaiah comes to him and basically says, "Get your affairs in order. You're dying." But Hezekiah prays, he begs God, and according to the story, he's granted another 15 years of life. And to prove it, a crazy miracle happens. The shadow on a sundial actually moves backward. But this amazing recovery leads to a huge, fateful mistake. Some envoys from Babylon, which was this up-and-coming power, come to congratulate him on getting better. And in a moment of, let's call it pride, Hezekiah gives them the grand tour. He shows them everything, all the gold, the silver, the weapons, the whole treasury. Well, the prophet Isaiah finds out and he is furious. He delivers this chilling prophecy, telling Hezekiah that one day Babylon will be back, and they will carry everything and everyone away into exile. A prophecy that, tragically, came true over 100 years later. So, when you really boil it all down, Hezekiah's 29-year reign was just defined by crisis and conviction. This is a king who stood up to the mightiest empire on earth, who led a massive religious revival, who built these incredible engineering projects, and who, against all possible odds, saved his capital city from being wiped out. Which really leaves us with the big question, right? Who was Hezekiah? Was he this incredibly righteous king who was saved purely by his faith? Or was he a smart, pragmatic survivor who prepared like a genius and then just got really, really lucky? You know, maybe the real answer is somewhere in between. It's a story that we have to piece together from stone, from clay, and from scripture. The story of the king who was trapped but never captured.